I know teachers right now are into their 40s who are still paying college loans off.
The people that aren't in education complain about what we're not doing in education. You're like, all right, so the people that are doing cool stuff, you almost have borderline a moral obligation to say, all right, this is what I'm doing then.
Let me ask you a very quick question. Is it easier to get a passport than it is to substitute teach?
Yep. Like, be lazy. Well, if I'm training people to be teachers, be lazy. Yeah, shut up and let them do it.
There's two emotions that I straddle, right? Is hope and worry. So I'm worried to death about kids, but I'm super hopeful about the future.
Education wants the instant gratification. They want the weeds. They don't want the trees.
CTE is coming gangbusters for the traditional, practitioners who don't want to even entertain moving things around for the sake of efficacy.
Do we need as much time as we need to do school?
I mean, if you're asking a 14-year-old, they're going to tell you a weekend will be fine. But no, I want to challenge kids.
If you're about to listen to this podcast, buckle up.
You're listening to the Disrupt Education podcast. Here are your hosts, Peter Hostrawser and Alli Dahl.
Welcome back to the Disrupt Education podcast. I have Alli Dahl here. I'm Peter Hostrawser. What's up, Alli? How's it going?
It's summertime, and it probably will be hot still when this episode comes out. But if you're boiling, we're boiling. It's less hot. I don't know if I've shared this yet on the podcast, but so my husband had chickens before they were posh. They're very posh right now. Yeah. But we got new chickens, and we were out of town this weekend when it was really hot, and all I was thinking about, I was like, are my chickens gonna live? And obviously chickens live in the heat and stuff, but they're so cute, and they're not egg laying chickens yet. That'll be at the end of the summer, probably when this episode comes out. But they're just starting to get out of their chirping into clucking, and they're really cute.
I don't know how to transition from that, but other than we've got a golden egg of a guest today. How about that?
Yes, we do.
Wow. That's DG Sax. Derrick Griffin is here with us. First episode, 300th episode. There's a couple things we've done along the way. There's so much learning here, and Alli and I thought it would be a great kind of cap off for this series, Derrick, that we've had several kind of lenses and conversations with you, but we just had Liam Sundling, a couple of ladies talking about their experiences in their 20s. Isaac Palmer goes all the way back to episode 7, and I think that's pretty much where we're going to just kind of jump in. We learned a lot. But tell us what you're up to these days right now before we dive into that, Derrick.
Oh my. Well, yeah, it feels like centuries, honestly, since we've talked. And to your point, Alli, it's funny. I'm at a point now where, I now have a fiance. My future mother-in-law has chickens of her own, funny enough, and we get eggs all the time. So, all this talk about inflation with eggs, I'm like, all right, whatever. But with all that being said, though, I feel like, right now I have hit a pinnacle within DG Sax and what I do musically, outside of everyday life, and now having my own space that complements that. I think for me, it's finding ways to continue to grow, even on the social media side more than anything. I look 5 years ago when TikTok was first emerging, and the idea of you being able to go viral within 1 or 2 videos, which is still the case today. But these viral moments were happening so rapidly 5 years ago. And for me, I feel as though I had my moments, but there's also still areas of opportunity where I can continue to leverage social media and other channels to show people what I do, right? It's gotten to a point now where I'm getting so many leads, I'm getting so many people coming to me and recognizing the work that I do, that I don't necessarily have to go chasing after anything. It ultimately has come to me naturally, which is pretty amazing state to be in now, right? And to be able to work with some of the biggest logos, right? You think of Robin Hood, you think of Grey Goose, you think of the Chicago Cubs, so many different places that music has taken me that I never anticipated, expected, but ultimately it comes down to you just being a true human at the end of the day. And regardless of what service or product you provide, that's really the key is continuing to be true to who you are. And I think for me, like, coming out of high school, it was a learning curve. It was an opportunity to figure out what do I really want to do. And coming out of a high school, I found college, and college kind of gave me this healthy middle ground of me being able to do music, but also business, right? And so those skill sets eventually transferred into me doing sales by day, which I still do to this day. I work a 9 to 5. But I'm slowly pivoting into a space where now it's becoming, well, is this 9 to 5 really going to make sense for me ultimately when it's all said and done? And just starting to understand too, like how I value my time differently, right? And as you get older, I think there's a different way that you look at your time, and we all have the same 24 hours in a day, as you would tell us, Mr. Hostrawser, and how you decide to use it is up to you. So I'll start.
Yeah. So if you haven't listened to episode 1 or episode 300, you got to go back to kind of like catch up a little bit with Derrick. Like what's really interesting about your journey, and having been on the podcast over, it's like, and you've known Peter for like a decade at this point, which is probably like what?
Yeah. 10 years. Yes.
Double digits. Is like what we're one of the things we're finding on this series, and why we really wanted to have you a part of it, is that high school messaging and college messaging and even like young 20 messaging can be like really confusing. And especially now, I think it's easy for people to get lost in a path, or they don't there's too much information, so they just like shut down. And I feel like you were maybe the timing of like you getting out of high school and going to college, you kind of missed some of that, yet I'm certain some of your peers did not. And so it's like you had a lot of wisdom, and your episodes are filled with just really great nuggets. But like, were there any messages in high school or college that you feel like helped you like really elevate and go on the path that you're on now? Because it can be easy to get lost and then just like give up. And we're trying to explore this idea of like what messaging is really powerful for young people right now that can help them get on a path like that you're on, which is building something, and yeah, what would you say to that?
Well, I think high school was presented to me in a way where you were provided a lot of different experiences, right? Some were considered cool, some were considered like, we don't do that because that's not cool, right? But like, I think at the end of the day, like you've got to like take every experience for what it is, and like really try to like just take the most out of everything you do. And so I feel like being able to go to Oak Park River Forest was a huge opportunity that I was granted. And being able to have different exposures to like even me like playing sports, right? And building collaboration skills through being on a team, was so valuable. Being able to learn how to lead a team, right? Understanding sacrifice, right? Like like character building skills that you're not just going to learn being in the classroom, or necessarily hearing from one teacher or another. But I think there were teachers that were less scripted. And I guess what I mean by that is, right, like you come in with this agenda, and this is the curriculum, and this is what you got to follow, and this is what you got to do in order to be successful, because if you don't, you won't. And like, I think at the end of the day, like that, I was grateful to have teachers who didn't always do that, right? Like, I think they gave us like the true essence of like what life is going to throw at you. And it's either you're able to combat it, you're able to take the feedback and figure out how do you make an adjustment, and how can you get better from it. It wasn't about singling out one individual, right? Like I think that was the thing for me, is I was an active listener. I took the good and the bad and never took it personal. Whereas, you know, at that age, it's challenging to not take those things personal because you're so consumed in what other people may think about you. And so I think that when you can try to separate yourself from that and ultimately stay focused, you know, on the fact that like I'm here to build all these different experiences and also be able to make my own opinion about what I like and what I don't, as opposed to having so many people influence what you think is good or what you think is going to make you successful. Because post high school and post college, you start to realize that some of these things don't even transfer or translate to what it is that you ultimately end up doing in life, you know, and then you go back saying, like, what was that all for? Like, why, what was the purpose in that? Right. So I think it's a twofold thing. It's institutional, but it's you as an individual have to have that desire. I think I had a natural desire at that age, partially because of my family. I mean, they instilled a lot of morals and values in me that made me have a belief as though I could really do anything and everything I put my mind to. I slowly found out that I wasn't the tallest person, so basketball was not going to do it, you know, for 4 years. But I started understanding my strengths and I started playing to my strengths and I accepted areas that I may have not have been as good in. And I leaned on others around me to really like amplify those areas where I felt like I could be better and just, you know, try to leverage that as an opportunity to like grow, right? Like I think that's the key in life is like we're all in a learning experience in an environment where we're all trying to grow and understand each other from each perspective possible. So that's kind of what I guess stuck out to me is ultimately the experiences. And I think the only way you can create those experiences is if you try to branch out of your comfort zone. Like you have to get out of your regimented routine. Maybe if you go to the gym in the afternoon, maybe go in the morning. Like just kind of like alter like your path in certain ways to just kind of see like, are you adaptable? Are you able to pivot, be flexible in certain situations, right? So those are just a couple things that come to mind for me as I think about 10 years ago where I was and where I am now, you know.
This is becoming a masterclass, Alli. I knew it would. It's awesome.
I
Um,
know.
I think one, you know, and thank you for you've been very, I guess, consistent when it comes to that message. Even in 10 years ago,
Yeah.
11 years ago, when, you know, we were sitting at Oak Park and River Forest High School, and, you know, I was learning from you, I was learning from your crew. Which I got to throw a shout out to Dan and Kelvin, and you know, Dan's
Yes.
so busy, I cannot get that guy to come back. So, but that's all good. But that, you know, utilizing your team and everything, it's very interesting. One thing you open this entire um, podcast with was something that's interesting that I rarely hear somebody in their 20s say, is that college was a healthy middle ground.
Yeah.
Usually people, like, for some reason, and it's still out there, think that's a means to an end, right? Like that it is it, that's it. I get my degree. And there's still, even to this day, and I'm not going to blame anybody, but it's just kind of a generalized thing. Um, I don't think you ever thought of it that way, even though you fast passed your way all the way through an MBA.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, in average time lengths. So,
Yeah.
um, how did that become a healthy middle ground for you? How did you get that in your head? Because I think
Mm.
you were thinking that even before you finished your college courses. But how does somebody learn that? That's a great. I'd
I
love that.
think I think where I initially saw it as a healthy middle ground was when I started seeing a lot of my peers say, "Well, I need to go to the biggest school out of state because I need to get as far away from my parents as possible to be able to grow and become the person I need to be in life." And so when that when that story is like kind of painted for you in your senior year, everyone starts to gravitate toward that. And I feel as though for me, that wasn't like the end all be all, right? And I get that, some of my peers' relationships were different with their parents than my relationship with my parents. But what I also then saw, year, 2 years removed from high school, was a lot of folks coming back, whether that was just for affordability purposes or it just wasn't what they thought it was going to be, right? Like a lot of people build up this picture in their head as though it's gonna have the bright shiny lights on it. It's gonna be the nice red convertible going down, whatever big street, you're in a big campus, right? So like there's a lot of variables that you don't start to think about until you experience it. Getting back to my point about experiences. And I think for me, I did my due diligence of looking at a school that was going to provide me music, which is something I wanted to keep in my life no matter what. And I wanted to study business. And obviously, my first exposure to business, for those who don't know, was from the OPRF School of Business program, sports and marketing, accounting, investment, small business management. Doing all these different projects really was a huge influence, but inspirational in the sense to where I knew it was something I was capable of, and I felt good about it. Like I was like, I feel like I can help people with this. I can help businesses with this, and I knew I always wanted to do something to help the greater, people. It wasn't just about me, right? But I knew that before I started college, and I think I had some things that kind of reconfirmed it. One of the things that comes to mind for me was, you go through some of these schools, they want you to do like an audition. And my audition was very non-traditional, I would say. I sat in for a practice at the rehearsal for the jazz ensemble at the time for Robert Morris University downtown in Chicago. And I went to a concert and I was set to play a song. And so I rehearsed that song for probably about a week and a half, 2 weeks leading up. And I pretty much knew to the T like what I was going to do. I was very calculated in what I was going to do. I had a solo. And in the moment, I recorded that video and I can go back and look at it. I remember the conductor was telling me, like, keep going. And I didn't even see it in the moment because I was so engrossed in what I knew I was going to do. Like, I guess I was very focused on my execution of that. But I share that because what that then translated into was me going back to the director after the concert. And I'm like, well, hey, when's my audition? Right. I'm thinking this is just a concert. This is just like hey, let's hit. He said, no, man, this is your audition. You got it, man. You don't have to think twice. We want you. And so when you also find somewhere where your gift is wanted and you're respected, that goes further than anything. And so I think that's another thing that's so key is like being a youth, like you have to find a space, and it can be easier said than done, but you have to find a space and the people that you're around that complement your values and the things that you believe in and that are aligned with you, because that's what's ultimately going to get you to that next level, or it's gonna bring the best out of you, right? And I think that was the thing for me, as Mr. Hostrawser alluded to. I had a crew of people who got the best out of me. And that's across the board for anyone who wants to go into sports, who wants to become a IT manager, who wants to become an entrepreneur, whatever it is you decide you want to do, whatever your path is, you have to surround yourself with people that are going to bring the best out of you so that you can find that healthy middle ground. Because there will be times where things just don't go your way, but how you navigate that and make the most of that space that you're in. There's a saying that an artist I used to work with, he goes by the name Jams. He always says that there's people out here doing more with less. And so, that to me has always resonated. Like there are so many people out here doing more with less. So when you think you don't have enough, it's like, have you maximized the environment, the space that you have? And I think a lot of times people are making a lot of false, excuses for themselves where, they almost talk themselves into a situation that's not even in existence, right? So when I say a healthy middle ground, like college, I don't think is for everyone. I say that as someone who earned my MBA, and I sit here and say, like, I don't think I got the most value I could have, but I made the most out of the experience I had, and I made the most out of the environment I had, and I maximized on that. And I feel like that's what's led me to where I'm at now. So
so wise, right?
My hand hurts. I'm taking so many notes.
I know. So, and one of the things, I mean, you should go into speaking and like to uplift people. You have just such a positive outlook on the world and life, and your wisdom it's not like false positivity, right? Where it's like not rooted in anything. You have very good rooted pieces in your life, and that's in every single episode. And so it's cool to see, you're like in another stage of life,
Yeah.
getting married and starting a family, you know what I mean, like with your wife and everything.
Yes.
Like you might be, I would say you're really kind of in the middle of like a late millennial, early Gen Z, or yes. And right. So one of the things that I see with, current college Gen Zs or just recent graduates is they leave college or maybe even high school feeling like there isn't a path for them, or that maybe they chose wrong, or that they're a failure in some way. They don't have like this deep root of purpose, or they haven't maybe found their space. Do you have, like a message or something, to kind of like, or friends, or a story about like failure, and maybe like the messaging of culturally that is really deep right now, right? Because everyone's posting online their highlight reels, and some people can't get out of that loop and think that like, I'm not enough, I'm not doing enough, I'm, whatever that failure feeling is.
Yeah.
It's really heavy right now with youth.
Yeah.
You have overcome it.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say are some things that maybe have helped you, or, that could help our young listeners and people who work with young people to be like, this was really impactful, and I think more people need to hear it?
Yeah, I think finding a mentor, to your point, I think is super important. Easier said than done, but I think where it starts is like if there's a certain path that you have kind of lined up for yourself, where you're like, I want to become a musician, or I want to become a business owner, like go look at business owners that are doing what you're doing.
Mhm.
The action is always the hardest part, because you have people that say like, oh, I want to do this, but like, how bad do you really want to do it? Like, are you going to make the effort and the sacrifice to go knock on doors? Are you going to go like, do you have that sense of urgency, right? Do you have that desire? And so, you can lead a horse to the pond, but you can't force it to drink water, right? Like, and I think, in this age of social media and what we do have, there's a lot that we can leverage to our advantage. But I think there are a lot of distractions that this newer generation does have to navigate, which does make it very challenging. And so I think there's a lot of influence in that they see. So, and a lot of these videos that we see are the end product, right? So like, how do we start illustrating things that show the journey? How do like, because for me, I sit here and I tell you my story. It wasn't all like rose petals and, sunshine, right? Like there were ups and downs. There were times like I was going to all type of events, not getting paid, not getting any type of commissions, no tips, none of that. Just grind. Just like, hey, I want an opportunity to show my gift, because I knew that my gift would eventually make room for me. And by me being in these rooms, I was able to network with a lot of great individuals and a lot of great people. So that's what it comes down to. Like, you've got to put in the reps. And I think sometimes what I've observed from some folks that have come before myself is like, or after me, I should say, is like the fact that, they expect everything to happen all at once, that instant gratification. And I think we've got to figure out like a healthy middle ground between that, because what happens is like the video that you don't think is going to hit, it's going to hit. And then when someone sees it, you're kind of taken aback because you didn't think it was as good. But it's not always about how you may see it. It's like you got to start understanding how you can influence others by what you do, and also knowing that like you really don't know who's watching what you're doing nowadays. Like it's gotten scary for me sometimes. Like I see how easily like someone could search me on Google now. Like if you type in Chicago saxophone player, I'm one of the first people that pops up on Google. And it wasn't like that all the time. Like it took time for me to get to that point. And it's not impossible. I think some people see that and they're like, "Oh man, I don't know if I can get there." It's like, no, it's a lot closer than you may think. But the
Mhm.
question becomes, are you willing to make the sacrifices? Are you willing to put in the extra time? Are you willing to put the extracurricular stuff to the side for a little bit to say, like, you know what? If this is ultimately what I desire to do, I want to give it my best shot. So like I don't want to go back saying, why didn't I at least give it my all or at least try this? Right. And those are conversations I'm even having still to this day, even with my fiance. She's getting into her own lanes, and like I love that she's just exploring. She's in this exploration phase. She's someone that went to college, got her degree, works in corporate, right? But like she's thinking about all these things too. Like she sees what I'm doing and she's inspired and influenced by that. But she's not like at this point in her life where she's like, I feel like age is like the cutoff for me, or like that's the bracket where I've got to just stop going after what I believe in. It's like, no, I mean, there's tiers to it, there's levels to it. Like you just got to continue to understand that it's a process. And if you can see that, or if there's a way to illustrate that process, whatever field it is that a high schooler or a student's going through, like if they can see that process and understand that it's a journey in it, and appreciate the journey for what it is, I think that's where you can start seeing more progress and not necessarily being so quick to like conclude that it's a failure because it didn't happen yesterday, right? Like I think
Mhm.
that's where we're at. So,
In this entire series, I love this because I think one of the things that Allie and I really learned was not only through the people that we've interviewed and that have been here before, it was also the people who did not answer the ask
Mhm.
or answered the ask like I'm just not ready yet, or maybe I'm not disrupting education the way you think I am, and there's a lot of assumptions that were made, maybe, or fear that my story isn't legit or didn't move the needle as far as I thought, so therefore yeah, I may be a little embarrassed now. Some of these are assumptions by Allie and I, but it was pretty damning evidence that there were a lot of people that we reached out to, and a very small select few actually came on the podcast. We got ghosted. There was a lot of different things there, right? And I think that's very interesting. Going back to kind of what you unpack there is, showing the journey when you're in it every day. And I really like the fact that you're talking about how do you show your own journey, because you
Mhm.
can go back. I mean, you and I can go back and look at projects in high school and college and that because we have put it down. And I think that's so important because some students haven't done that, students, young people, and I get to see and Allie get to see like the time frame in between.
Mhm.
And it's just like if you're there every day, you don't see, your kids growing up. It's if you don't see them for, a couple of years, things change and
Right.
there's movement. And that's so important. One question that I wanted to throw your way is one of the things that I have seen, there's skills here, and what I'm doing with the internship program, you're nailing every single one of those durable skills, if you will, like communication, decision making, problem solving, teamwork, all these things that you are able to really kind of understand through your journey. One of the biggest skills that I see that's a big challenge for anybody on a path to whatever they think success is making decisions, right? They get caught up in the what if or the confidence levels. And I kind of want to just lean on you. And I know we've had, I don't know if you know this, Allie, but Derrick and I had like about 90 short episodes that we were doing lives on
Yep.
LinkedIn for a while, and then we just got pulled into different directions. I should re post those somewhere along the way. But but how would you like making decisions and getting over that fear, or that I have this complex that I can't do it. You've made this, you bought a property, before you're
Yeah.
30, which to me is terrifying. But these types of decisions that you're making, how would you kind of help younger people or anybody who is indecisive?
Yeah, I think it starts with like try to do as much research as you can, right? There's some things in life that you're not going to be fully prepared for. There's things that are going to happen and you got to learn on the fly, like how am I going to deal with this situation? But I think in most cases there's an opportunity now where we've got YouTube University and we've got Google and we've got all these great resources where you lean on that to get at least a surface level understanding of what it is that you want to get into, right? And at that point, you can then start to formulate your opinion around, well, this is how I could navigate, or this is how I would go about it, as opposed to Mr. Hostrawser, as opposed to one of my other teachers, right? And I think then that's where you start making that decision as to whether or not, like, does this align with who I am, right? Like, and you start to realize, um, you start to highlight more, emphasize more on like the strengths that you bring to the table. So some people are more extroverted than introverted. Some people have no problem, giving a presentation in front of a bunch of people in a room. For others, that's not their strong suit. Maybe they prefer to be on the back end and not, kind of be behind the scenes, but be a very valuable asset to a team, right? You don't always have to be in front to be the star, right? But I think to make decisions, right, like you can't care about what other people feel about it or how people think about it. I think it's one of those things you just got to really lean into it. You got to see where it's going to take you. It may not take you exactly where you thought in your mind, but I think that's the beauty in it, right? Like, even in the moments where I've failed, I always say that's where I learned the most. I mean, I've won a lot. I like winning, right? But like, when you fail, there's something in that kind of forces you to make an adjustment because something isn't fully aligned. It's not quite there. And so there's like in risk taking, like there's always going to be like that uncertainty, right? But like I feel like we only live one time, right? What are you going to do to maximize every opportunity, right? You see people that are in situations that may not be, as fortunate to be in as you. Like, how are you going to maximize on that? And make a decision where, you have family that maybe put you in place to be able to do certain things that others may or may not be able to do. Like, I think you have to just really like, just be grounded in what you want and what you desire. But I think part of that just comes from looking at others who are doing it. I think if you look at others who are doing it, you get a better understanding of like the process. You get a better understanding of like what skill set may be required. And I think breaking it down, right? Think of like a watch, right? Like everyone sees the outer face, but there's so much in the inside that is going on behind the scenes too. There's the gears. How do they shift from left to right? How do you go clockwise, right? Like when you start getting into the nitty gritty of things, like you may find a particular niche within that bigger entity that kind of brings it a little bit more digestible, right? Because I think that's what it is too. It's like you think about something that you really want to do, if it's tech related, if it's AI related, if it's sports related. But how do you make it where it's digestible and really like think about it as like, I'm going to learn the alphabet of the saxophone, or I'm going to learn my ABCs of whatever it is I want to do. And I think at that point it becomes more like I could do this. Like I think this is something I can do. And I think there you start making decisions as you move forward, right? So
yeah.
So
YouTube
much good stuff in
University.
there. I know. When he said that, I'm like, yeah, Isaac said that on his episode too.
Yeah.
He's like, I graduated from YouTube University.
That's awesome. I love it.
Which is, like 5 years ago, I'm sure it was said, but not at the frequency that it is now. So it's definitely like the proliferation of information and being able to do your research. But I think there's something about YouTube University because people are showing the journey. Like my dad watches I mean, he watches many channels. And my dad is older, right? Like, so he still goes to YouTube University, but he's a lifelong learner. And he's been watching this whenever it comes on, because we work together with my parents' property and whatnot. And it's this excavator who literally shows how he moves dirt. Like how to like plane a road and how to like, get rid, because my parents have this property where they have to maintain gravel driveways and
Yes.
roadways and whatnot. And so it's just like there's not much talking. It's just the sound of this driver. And there might be text or something. I'm like, Dad, what are you watching?
Yeah.
And I was on the path this past weekend and I was like, Dad, the road is so nice. Like, how did you do that? And he's like, well, I knew it would take 3 years because I watched this excavator show me how to do it over years.
Wow.
Right? Like years of watching this channel and like breaking it down. I didn't notice that it had changed, slowly. Like, little changes, but when he had gotten it kind of built up or, he'd been pushing the dirt, right? Like little layers, it eventually like does show. So it's like, it's interesting with your point, like you really can make a decision by starting small or, there is access to stuff, but that making decisions, taking action is so big. Like the other thing I was just thinking with what you were sharing is, I teach people how to do their first or next skydive, but we prepare them for their first jump or their next jump. If you're looking at the skills I'm working on and, when they're far more advanced. And if you were like, oh, I want to be like that. And then you go on your first jump and you're completely overwhelmed and like, it's absolutely like adrenaline and body overload. You're never going to make the next jump because you can't see how did I get from point one to jump, now like over 600. And it's like those small pieces people I think forget. So it's like so brilliant what you shared there.
Yeah.
There's so much I want to dig in but like the one question we've kind of been asking our guests on this series is like, right, for you it's 10 years ago plus that you were 16, right, and in high school and like growing up. And I think it's being in your mid 20s is a powerful time to be like, well, what would you tell your 16-year-old self about school and life, and that you may not have had the perspective that you have now? You were pretty wise at 16 based on what I can gather, but there's still going to be something that you would go back and tell your 16-year-old self, like, hey,
yes,
what should you lean into? What should I be thinking about? What would you say?
I think as important as you think about the future, you have to stay present. Like be present in the moment you're in and understand like how valuable that is. Like cherish it for what it is. Reflect, like take time to reflect too, right? Like when you've went through that experience, reflect on the good and the bad, like what went good, what went bad. I've always been someone who's tend to lean on the positive, but as I've gotten older, I've understood why you also want to look at what didn't go as great as you anticipated or what could have happened, right? And just like take that as an opportunity to observe, right? Be patient. Be patient. Don't be like such in a rush to get to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing. And don't feel as though you have to be doing like 5 different things to be relevant or like, you know what I mean? Like, I think, when I came in as a freshman in high school, I was juggling basketball and playing the music. And, my parents were like, well, you got practice here, then you got to go to a rehearsal from like, that seems like a lot for you. Like, is that something you really want to do? And I did. But then as I started thinking about it more, I was like, this is kind of a lot. And, physically it was taking a lot on my body too. Like I started thinking about just my personal health and like future wise, like how that would translate, you know. And I think about it now. I mean, I don't regret it. I still play basketball now, but I play it at my own time, you know, and I play it at my leisure. So I think, you know, with the experience with college, it's that healthy middle ground, like I mentioned before. Um, and yeah, just like the younger version of myself, I think would have just, I would just say stay curious, right? Like continue to just be a sponge. The people that you thought were weirdos or whatever, like there's something to learn from everybody. And I think
Mhm.
in the moment, like being younger, there was always these stereotypes or like, oh, this person acts this way, so you probably should stay away from them or whatever. It's like there's so much to learn from everyone because everybody comes from a different walk of life. And like for me, being able to go to Oak Park River Forest was a privilege because I got a chance to like meet so many different people from so many different backgrounds. And I feel like that's what's allowed me to be effective in the real world and not feel restricted as to what I can and cannot do. Because I work around all different types of people. I get so many different people thinking I'm one type of person and I'm not, you know. A lot of times I get the hair, they think I'm Puerto Rican, they think I'm Mexican, right? Latino. I love it though because it just shows that like I can be adaptable in a lot of different situations and just have that versatility. And I think I realized that at that time, like 10 years ago, because me coming from the background that I was, like there were people that were intrigued by that. They were like, man, like, what is your culture background? Like how have you gotten to this point of playing music? And do you come from a music background, right? Like all those different things would come up and you know, I think even at that age, I guess just having more of an appreciation for that too, right? Because sometimes you kind of brush it off, like, oh yeah, my dad's, African American, my mom is Greek and Polish. Like you don't, I think in that moment I didn't think much of it, but now as I get older, I appreciate it so much more who I am, and
Mhm.
what I stand for, right? And just continue to learn about that because there's so much more I don't even know, so
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, there's so much knowledge in this. I know, like when we cut this up, man, and AI is going to pull a lot of. It's going to be like my computer will be smoking. So thank you. But basically, one of the biggest things that I think Allie and I and our conversations, and you've said it very much many times within the stories that you've shared today, and even on the other podcasts and such that we've worked together on, there's really a big reflection piece and really looking into who you are rather than who the system or anybody else thinks you are. And I think that is a very big, I know Allie and I will probably have some more conversation on that, but that's such an important piece because even as the internship coordinator where I'm at right now is really leaning into it's a very self-driven course, and a lot of students, especially teens, are not used to taking the time and documenting like who they are, their feelings, or how they see the world. They're just receiving a
Yeah.
lot of
Mhm.
messages, and I hear you when you're saying those distractions because once you just become a person that's just hearing a bunch of messages and watching
Yeah.
and consuming, you no longer become a creator that who you are, right? Whether you're outgoing or
Yes.
in a lot of what we are consuming, and this goes back to Josh Schuba, like is out there in the world that is you have to be loud and you have to be showing things, and I really like that, and I'm learning as well that it doesn't always work that way. And the way that you have handled things throughout the year. Look, man, I know there's frustrations. I know the failures. I'm not
Oh
going to
yeah,
put a lot
yeah,
of them
for
out
sure.
there. I
You
remember,
know, you
your
know.
your dad talking to me like, you got to get him not to do this thing, and no, it wasn't anything
Yeah,
life threatening, but I'm like, he's got to go through it.
right, right.
Um,
Yeah.
and but the reflections of those things. Kind
Yes.
of to sum this up, how do you think we can help people better reflect within quote unquote systems that they have to be in, right? So I think a lot of our listeners are not only maybe students, but definitely educators and administrators and such. And we've kind of umbrellaed everything under social emotional learning and da 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 da. But how do we better build within our systems, secondary, post-secondary, even primary, how to have someone look within themselves? What are your thoughts there?
Man, I think honestly, like we're doing a podcast, which is incredible, right? I love the body of work that you've established over the last 10 plus years now, right? I
Yep.
mean, but it doesn't just have to be the podcast, right? And what I mean by that is like it can simply be checkpoints within someone's journey, right? Someone that you've had in your program, someone who you've had take an internship and they had a positive experience, or maybe they had a negative experience, right?
Hmm.
And you're like, listen, I'm here for the journey. I'm not just here for this 10-week period that you've decided to be a part of this business and pick up X, Y, and Z skills. I'm here as a life coach for you. Like this is the part of the work that I do, long term. And really building in like the space for that. And it can be simply as a 30-minute, hour-long conversation like we're having now about anything and everything. Um, I think what I see from even people my age and those who are younger than me, they have a challenge finding a space to be able to be open with those who are older, who can provide a different perspective, who have had different experiences or have had experiences that maybe they just haven't had yet, right? And so there's just a lot to learn from that. I think if there's a willingness from students to have that desire and just be curious and be willing, right? And you having a space that offers that, I really feel like that's something um that a lot of people coming out of high school, I mean, it really doesn't, even me to this day. I mean,
Hmm.
you all brought up a lot of good things for me to think about. Alli, I've thought about public speaking. I have. Have I acted on it? No, I haven't. That's not to say I won't. But it's an opportunity for me to take a step back, reflect, right? Look at all the things I have done because I do know that I have a story to tell. And I think that if we have more space like this for youth to be able to speak out, and sometimes that's half of it. Sometimes they just need a space to talk it out, right? Like you've got all these thoughts that you're bottling in, and because you don't know how it's going to be received by someone, there's a hesitancy to act on what it is that you desire to do. And I think for you all would provide a very healthy space that's, no restrictions. It's all systems go, right? Like, if you want it, I want it, I'm there no matter what. That is very empowering for any youth that is trying to, figure out what they desire. So I think having a space for that is super key. And I feel like that's like a level of accountability too, right? And I think that's where there's a lack in the school system, just finding that middle ground because it doesn't end, right? For the high
Yeah.
schoolers and those who are, out there listening to this, like it doesn't end. I'm talking, I'm someone who's in sales. It's a very independent role. Like I've got to make my calls. I've got to reach out to, several different individuals a day. But that's up to me to do. I don't have someone that's just looking over my shoulder, 24/7 saying, "What are you doing, Derrick?" Like it never stops. If you're a business owner,
Mm.
you've got to you've got to have a system in place that works for you, and you've got to make sure that system has good hygiene, that it's well fueled, right? Like all these things, it's a continuous process, but ultimately, if you can stay ahead of it and stay on top of it, that's where things really start running so smoothly to the point that you don't have to think about it. And if you
Hmm.
can get to that point, that's where the magic really happens,
Yeah.
honestly.
Love
So,
that.
yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Wow. I got chills.
Yeah. Well, that's disrupting education right there, like
It is.
providing those spaces and you just kind of remind me of some of the things that I've learned from as an educator and doing
Yeah.
some things differently and even now, thank you for that, because it really made me go back into my thought process and how did I get here? Because I think even, I don't do that all the time, right? You have
Mhm.
family, you've got,
Totally.
all these other things that you got to support. And you start to think about like, oh, wait, like, what spaces have I been in? What have I built? What have I learned from?
Yep.
And yeah, that's amazing.
Absolutely.
Alli, what do you think?
I'm thinking, Derek, you maybe I'm just gonna throw this on here. Like, if people are listening, and like Peter and I, we always say like message us, contact us, like let us know about the episode. But like, I want to be like, if you're listening to this and you have a young person, or you are a young person, or you feel like Peter and I could help you in some way, or Derek, reach out, like
Mhm.
legitimately reach out. Let's have a
Mhm.
conversation. Peter and I have conversations with people all the time that aren't on the air.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but you're really making me see the value of giving back even more, and providing kind of that life coaching essence, because Peter and I come from very different backgrounds, very different spaces. We care deeply about education and disrupting it in whatever way, but truly we do want kind of to provide that space for people to, I want to disrupt education. What can I do? Reach out to us.
Mhm.
We love having these types of conversations. They don't necessarily need to be a podcast, but you never know, because we also love talking to people and podcasting. So
Yes.
but yeah, like I would really encourage our listeners to listen to this episode again,
Yeah.
and like just started back at the beginning. It was so good. And I can't wait for it to come out. And then just like I challenge you to, like, if you know someone who's like struggling in any way, it can be small. It doesn't have to be like, oh my gosh, my life just blew up, but like they just need someone to talk it out to, right? Like, I
Yeah.
encourage you to reach out to us,
Yeah.
because we will be here to listen, and we can't promise that it's going to be like life-changing advice, but we have enough experience between the two of us to probably like bounce some ideas around.
Yeah. Let's go.
Let's go. Let's
And
do
I think,
it.
yeah, I think one of and thank you, Derek. I'm serious, man. Like my hand does hurt. I've got like 5 pages of notes down here. So, um, I think that's one of the most amazing thing. And what I also want to let people know is if you want to see the journey, like the gaps, like take a look at episode 1, episode 300, and this episode, and just watch. Like you can, I mean, even myself, even Alli, as I'm going through and playing around.
Derek,
Yeah.
one, like you couldn't have picked a better OG. I'm just
I
saying.
know, right? I don't know what. I mean, it's like you get in the major leagues and you hit a home run right away because you got a great teammate, and you're like, all right, thanks, man. So,
That's what it's about, man.
so, but Derek, man, what's next for you, man, and where can people connect with you? Definitely know that you're off the charts with the saxophone at this moment.
Thank
It's
you.
really hard to book you, so
I'm telling you, you better get ahead of it, man. I'm grateful for it.
yeah.
DGSax.com, all different platforms, Instagram, Facebook, you name it.
Mhm.
It can be any type of event that you're looking to put together. If it's a fellowship of life, if it's a wedding, if it's a private event, you name it. I'm a part of the universal language of life, which is music. So it's something we all can connect to. But I'm always a phone call and text away, or email, whatever works.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for having the conversation and giving me the space to talk on this. This was great.
So much learning, man. Really appreciate you, and all the way through so far. We're going to be at 400 soon, and we just
Yes.
keep going, keep learning. It's a journey. So, thank
What's
you so much. Thank you to our listeners for hanging out with us today. It is such just a privilege to have you come back, Derek, and talk. And man, I'm going to go back and have to use AI to kind of pull out some crazy awesome stuff here. It's my computer may blow up, so I might be out for a while. So for Alli Dahl, I'm Peter Hostrawser. Thank you so much. We'll catch you next time on the Disrupt Education podcast. That's a wrap on this episode of the Disrupt Education podcast. Let's keep the momentum going. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share this episode out.
If you want to dive deeper into disrupting education, visit our website at disrupteducationpodcast.com.
Here's the bottom line. We believe real change in education starts locally. It happens when communities come together to rethink learning. If you're an educator, school leader, or organization looking to take action towards real change in education, we are here to help. Reach out and connect.
And we'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. So drop us a line wherever you listen. And until next time, take that bold step beyond your comfort zone. Challenge the status quo and be the change education truly needs.
Because at the end of the day, education isn't just about subjects. It's about students. And when we dare to disrupt, the future of learning is waiting.